Hello and welcome to Central Florida Salute YouTube. My guest today is Michael Armistead, and he's a Lieutenant Colonel, United States Marine Corps. I'm coming to you from my home here in Leesburg, Florida, and you are up there in by what is that?
I'm up here in Quantico.
Quantico. I can't think of
Yeah,
Quantico. I told you I'm getting tired.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Michael is joining us from Quantico, the Marine Corps, and he was a lieutenant colonel. And I heard about you through a mutual friend, Colonel Keith Oliver. We
Yes,
did a
sir.
radio show, and you're retired, and you're with the Marine Corps Association, which is we're going to talk about. But first, I'd like you to talk about your career with the Marine Corps, why you went in the Marines, and what did you do when you were in the Marines? How long were you in?
So I retired after about 24 years and some change. 24 years because I actually, before I joined the Marine Corps, spent some time as a Army reservist in field artillery. And so with reserve time, they kind of tacked those years on at the end. And so I had a little extra time at my retirement. But yeah, 8 years as an Army reservist. And then 23 years or so as a Marine Corps officer.
So you were in the Army Reserve, then you went into the Marines,
Yes,
correct?
yes. What's that?
Well, explain that one.
Okay. I'll try. It's a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. I kind of like to joke that I've worn the uniform of three services during my life. So as a as a freshman in college, I tried out Air Force ROTC and didn't quite enjoy it. It wasn't quite as military as I thought it would be. They're just kind of focused a little bit different, air power. And I really just kind of wanted to run through the woods with an M16. And so while I was in school, I thought, well, if I join the reserves, I can go to class, and then on the weekends, 1 week a month, I can run through the woods, and the M16. So. I joined up while I was in college the last couple of years. I was at school, and because the reserves are based on units that are close to where you live, there was a field artillery unit, an 8-inch howitzer unit, where I live. And so I joined that unit and did that for about 8 years, along with a few other jobs that I did right out of college. Got to a point in my life where I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I had a number of different odd jobs, substitute teaching, a little bit of journalism. Um, I taught gymnastics, believe it or not. Worked in a hospital, but just trying to make ends meet. And at one point, I had a conversation with my dad, who wasn't in the military, but had a strong fascination with it. And he said, had you considered, going in the Marine Corps as an officer? And, honestly, I hadn't. Growing up, I did have a fascination with the Marine Corps. I had read books like With the Old Breed by E.B. Sledge and Goodbye Darkness by William Manchester. And I'd always wondered as a youngster how, those men survived Peleliu and Iwo Jima and Okinawa. But I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to join the Marine Corps, enlisted. I was going to go to, college and all of that, but never really realized, that dream, so to speak, of being a Marine. In fact, I still have a letter, if you can believe this, where as a 13-year-old, do you remember back in the old days in the magazines that have those little tear out cards where, if you want to find out more about the Marine Corps, fill out this card and put it in the mail. So,
I didn't, I didn't have that problem. When I got out of high school, I got a letter saying you're 1A, go
oh,
to
there you
physical. I didn't have to worry about those cards.
go. Right.
I'm a little older than you.
So, So I guess probably, after that, and they were, trying to get folks in, they had those little those recruiting cards. So I sent one in and, I got a letter back and, the recruiter had written, "Hey, really appreciate your interest in the Marine Corps. But because you're 13, we encourage you to complete
Finish.
high school." Yeah, and then come see us later. And then he gave me a little iron-on sticker, you know. Well, Bob, I still have that letter. Um, and so that desire was still, inside me. So when my father brought that up, I'm like, let me look into it. At that point, I've been 28, 29 years old, so I was pretty near the cutoff in terms of when you could, join the military. But had always been an athlete, avid runner. And so, at the ripe young age of 28, I put in a package for OCS and passed and was able to get in. Because really, the Marine Corps is just concerned, like, are you physically able to keep up with
Mm,
everyone else? And I was. And so that was 1999 or so when I came in. And yeah, that kind of started off a great career in the Marine Corps. But yeah, it took me a little while to get there. Um, And, having had some time in the Army, it wasn't completely alien to me. I kind of had an idea of how the service worked. But, there is a distinct difference, I'd have to say, between how the Marine Corps does things and the Army. So, and that I learned fairly quickly.
yeah, yeah. It's funny you mentioned about being 13. There was association. I don't know if it's still going, but a friend of mine started it. It was the Underage Military Veterans Association.
Huh.
And yeah, he talked about how a lot of young people snuck into the service, especially around Korea and all that, World War II. And he told me a story of one young lady who I think she was like 12 years old. She had
Oh,
gone through
wow.
basic and she was on the parade field. You know how after you finish your basic, you're on the parade field and all that. Well, General Eisenhower was there at the time, and he
Wow.
looked at her and says, "How old are you, little girl?" Well, you go home and come back when you're old enough. But there was a whole association called the Underage Military Veterans Association. They were
Wow.
quiet for a long time because they were afraid they'd take their benefits away if they knew they snuck in too early. But they passed legislation so those men and women got their dues. It's interesting stories. I'm in the military history, so
Okay. Yeah, that is.
people.
So I
So
think these days that they might be considered what they call fraudulent enlistment. It's like
yes,
you
that's
deceive someone to serve, which seems kind of ridiculous, but yeah, it's good that they were able to work that out so that they can get the recognition they deserve, even though they started at a very, very young age.
yeah. Yeah, this guy was telling me how when he was a basic, they kept asking him how old he was, how old he is, because he had a baby looking face. He was very,
Hmm.
and he would get his razor out, and he'd shave, but there was nothing to shave. He didn't have a blade, but he went through the motion. you know. But anyway, so you joined the Marine Corps, and take me through basic, and where did you go?
So went to officer candidate school as all officers do here at Quantico, and actually had orders initially to go out to Okinawa. Um, but let me back up. When you go to the basic school, if you probably, Colonel Oliver mentioned this and you can talk to other officers, that's the basic school is where you get your MOS. And so obviously the basic school is focused on making you a basically trained infantry officer. So everybody's motivated to do, to be a grunt, right? And it's funny, being a little older, it's like, so I started doing the calculations, from 30 now, and then by the time I'm a captain, I'm probably going to be, 38, 39. Do I really want to be humping through the jungles of fill in the blank country, pushing on 40. So I'm like, maybe something different. So I was thinking about tanks. I was thinking about, combat engineering, some of these other, MOSs. But being that I had some background in journalism, I'd heard about this, MOS called Public Affairs at the time. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. And I had this idea of being kind of a war correspondent and how exciting that would be and getting the chance to see what, the different jobs that everyone does and, hopefully getting into the thick of a fight and documenting it. And so I put that as my top choice, as an officer. Was able to get it. And my first duty station out of TBS was Cherry Point, North Carolina, with the Second Marine Aircraft Wing, which consequently is really where I first met Colonel Oliver. I was under his chain of command because the wing fell under the MEF, and he was up at Camp Lejeune. I was down at Cherry Point, and the wing is a little different than on the grunt side, but while I was there, I had an opportunity to spend some time with some of the ground units um, up at Camp Lejeune and later out at 29 Palms. And being out in the field with those Marines really whetted my appetite about deployments and just getting out into the fleet and getting out into the field. So I spent about a year at Cherry Point, and then volunteered to go to a MU, to a Marine Expeditionary Unit. This is the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, and that was up at Camp Lejeune. So joined the MU, and this was prior to 9/11, and so at that time in the Marine Corps, the MU was really your main effort in terms of deployments. And going forward, they were really the epitome of America's 911 force, right? So do a 6-month deployment, 6-month med tour. So that first deployment, I did 2 of them with the MU. Went out to the Mediterranean. And Bob, it was a great experience. Just being able to do a lot of the bilateral training with, the militaries from different countries. I'd never been to Europe before. And so getting a chance to go to France and Germany and Croatia and Italy and Greece. And I mean, I'm like, I can't believe, as a Marine that I'm getting an opportunity to do things like this. During that deployment, we also participated kind of in the tail end of Kosovo. So had some, some time in a real combat zone for about a month or so. And then came back from that deployment. And at that time, within a 3-year tour, you could do 2 deployments with the same U during that tour. And so prior to my second deployment, it was when 9/11 took place. So we were just starting our workups for our next deployment, and ended up being the next MU to leave Camp Lejeune um, in support of OEF. We didn't get an opportunity to go into Afghanistan. We had another MU that had done that, and really by the time we had got there, believe it or not, a lot of the heavy fighting had been done. It seems odd talking about that now, but this was late 2001, early 2002. A lot of that was done. So most of our time was spent training in the wonderful country of Djibouti and doing circles in the Red Sea and then outside of Yemen and some other places. But yeah, I did a 6-month deployment with them, and then came back. And after that tour, just after having worked with a lot of the different other militaries and different services, I kind of had a taste for doing something that was joint. And so I joined or I became assigned to the U.S. Joint Forces Command out of Norfolk, Virginia. Um, so moved from Lejeune to Norfolk, which was kind of a step up in terms of just environment, and so I had a really, great experience there. But while I was there at JFCOM is when the Iraq War kicked off. So I'd been there, I don't know, maybe a year. And, you know, 2003 was when we went into Iraq and did the march up. And me and a buddy of mine who were a couple of Marines in this section at Joint Forces Command, sitting there watching this on TV. And it's like, man, we shouldn't be here. We need to be out there with the Marines. And so it was kind of tough for us to kind of watch what was going on and not be a part of it because we felt like we were stuck at this joint command. And Bob, sure enough, we get a call from Headquarters Marine Corps. This
Welcome
was
to the party.
it's like
Welcome to the party.
yeah, it was at this point, I think it was 2004. And they're like, hey, I know you're at a joint command, but we have this billet open to to go out in Iraq end of 2004, early 2005. And so looked at my buddy, we were both captains at the time, and he's like, my wife's gonna kill me if I leave. And I'm like, well, I'm not married. So I volunteered to go and ended up supporting the Second Expeditionary Force in Iraq for about 6 months, getting there late December 2004 and a good portion of first half of 2005, um, which and that was after I'm sure you've heard about the Battle of Fallujah, and so it was right after that major fight. So we rolled into Fallujah, a week or two after that when they were going to start the elections. So at that point, um, we were thinking we're kind of on the downward turn. We're looking at elections. Um, you know, maybe at some point we'll be able to redeploy, because things are starting to settle down, which, as we know, it really didn't. Um, so I was there until about the summer, and then, excuse me, came back to the States and went to school, um, what we call Expeditionary Warfare School, which is the required school for all captains to go through. And um, when you get out of that school, oftentimes you kind of get a choice of where you want to go next once you graduated. So I requested, not surprisingly, to go back to Camp Lejeune to be a part of Second Marine Division. Because I figured we knew at that point that we weren't going to be leaving Iraq again. So I wanted to get another deployment in if possible. And so that's what I did. Got orders to Lejeune, and in the summer of 2006. And I'll tell you this one story, and then I'll pause for any questions that you may have. But that summer, I proposed to my now wife, um, and to this day, I get confused between my wedding day and the day I joined Second Marine Division. One one was
Good luck,
June
buddy.
15th and one is July 15th. And it confuses me every time. It's like, wait, is this my anniversary of joining the division or is it my wedding anniversary? Um, and she ribs me every time when I have to ask, is it this month or next month? Um, so
I got to tell you a story, Colonel. This is how I solved that problem. When I got married to my wife, I married her actually on a Marine Corps birthday, 2 days before uh, Veterans Day. So I married on November 9th. I
Oh,
went
nice.
because I always remember Veterans Day. That's
You're right.
you had a triple
Yeah,
effort.
yeah, I should have done that. I didn't. And um so but kind of true to form, 6 months after we got married, I was on an aircraft going into Iraq again and with my wife, pregnant with our child. So uh yeah, plenty of stories like that I'm sure you've heard before. The spouse kind of waving away with the baby on the way as you go off for a year or so overseas. Um, that was a 13-month deployment, by far the longest deployment I had been on, and since uh, great experience, but that was a really long time working
Oh
out
yeah,
of
especially with the new one coming in and everything, a new parent.
yeah, yeah. So like many Marines and soldiers and service members alike, missed the birth of my child, but was able to see it a few weeks later on leave. But I'd have to say, and I'm sure some other folks can kind of understand this as well, that this was a time when obviously it was before cell phones. You had like iridium phones, but contact to the real world was fleeting, so
You know,
it,
Colonel, I was talking about this just the other day because, like I
hmm
said, I'm into military history. When you go into the World War One, the Trench War, World War Two, and now there's that great movie out, a six triple eight. Have you seen that one?
I haven't, no.
It's a all lady African American group in World War Two because unfortunately during there was segregation and
Right,
they wanted to be part of something and they were their own battalion. So you got to see this movie. It'll bring a tear to your eye. I'm telling you, it did to me. But when I was in during Vietnam, you look back and you say, well, World War One, the trench war, mail, forget it. World War Two, you were lucky if you got any mail.
right.
When I was stationed in Utapao, Thailand, and we used to talk about when Maggie's drawers went up on the mail room. That's when the mail came in, and
Yeah,
how much you always look forward to mail. And if you got a box of cookies, you were the favorite guy in the whole place. But
yep, yep,
now I had talked to some people that were in Afghanistan and Iraq. They have their cell phones. They can see their families, or they can go to a USO and there's a computer and you can see your family. But when you think back to World War II and World War One and even Korea, you didn't get to see your family, you know?
right, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know what you think about this, but I feel like there's a certain purity to that on the combat end because I mean, granted, you're concerned about your family back home and making sure that everything's going fine with them. But I think it does allow you to kind of focus on the mission a little bit more and not being
Heard that
concerned
said.
about, is that car payment getting paid? Or, are the utilities being paid? That I hate to say lack of content or lack of contact really helps allow you to focus on what's important day to day while you're in theater. And I for one kind of lack the purity of that, not having to worry about that stuff, particularly if the family's in good hands, right? In most cases, they are. And so I actually enjoyed being deployed. I know, my spouse will say otherwise, and like I hated the fact that I could never hear. I mean, and we'd write letters, and I mean they did have um like these phone centers in certain places where you can kind of I think they were called like MWR centers, so you can go in there and if you had a phone card or whatever, you could get a few minutes to kind of call back, but kind of in the outer provinces, you really didn't have that, right? So your contact was fleeting at best, unless there was emergency, and there obviously ways to get back in touch with your family or something was, a huge problem. But yeah, I really enjoyed. I mean, it was a long tour, but being able to, to focus on the mission, coupled with being perpetually sleep deprived, which I think every service member who's deployed can relate to that. Like you
Yeah.
just months and months of not
I've
getting
heard
full
other
rest.
people say, career military people say exactly what you did. That's nice that you could look at your cell phone, this and that, but you got to stay focused on the mission.
Yep.
And they said they didn't want that, they just assume they get a letter every once in a while.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that. You want to be focused. So yeah. So anyway, speaking of focused on the mission, you did 20, how many years you do?
It's about 24 years and some change, all told.
Okay.
Yep.
When you got,
Finished.
what did you do when you got out?
So I finished, my last tour was up at the Pentagon. And so working at headquarters Marine Corps in a department called the Communication Directorate, which really oversees a lot of the communication efforts from a service perspective out of the Pentagon. Um, as I was working through my retirement, one of I guess both of my leaders, my deputy director and the director of my department, um, new folks here at the Marine Corps Association. And my predecessor, who I've been working with on a different project here at MCA, reached out to my bosses and said, "Hey, I'm leaving MCA. Do you know anyone who's retiring that has a background in public affairs?" And and so I remember sending an email to my buddy who was my boss at the time. I'm like, "Do you?" And so um, I think he may have reached out to my predecessor, and then my director, April Langwell, I'm pretty sure reached out to General Schiroti and told them about me. And so I ended up kind of out of the blue getting a message on LinkedIn from General Schiroti asking if I would be willing to come in for a cup of coffee. And that's all the message said. Would you like to have a cup of coffee? Me being me and me knowing him from my MEF days, I'm like, this isn't a cup of coffee. This is the in-person interview that I'm going to show up for. So I'm like, absolutely, sir. And sent my resume and got my best suit and came on down to Quantico. And granted, I hadn't retired yet. I was still active duty, but just about to start my terminal leave. So I'd done a couple of interviews, but I was still drawing pay from my work at the Pentagon. So came down to Quantico and met up with General Schroeder and yeah, I told him about my background, read through my resume. He's like, you're a great fit for this position, which was essentially a new position, director of communications. And he's like, the position's yours if you want it. Um, and I jumped right on it. I was kind of, surprised, but, also, honored that he would, you know, ask me to fill this support position. I have been a longtime member of the association, a longtime reader of the Gazette and Leatherneck magazine, so I was pretty aware of, what they do to support Marines. And being that it's here at Quantico, it's still really close to the tribe, and so really it was kind of a no-brainer to take this position.
Tell me a little bit more about the Marine Corps Association. What exactly do you do? You work with charities or help with veterans or Marines, or what do you do?
So the Marine Corps Association is a nonprofit. We've got I guess, two main arms, 501(c)(3) and a 501(c)(19). So we have the association, we have a foundation. right? Foundation really focuses more on donor development and providing programs for Marines. The Marine Corps Association is, the professional association, for the Marine Corps. So, doctors have their own professional organization, professional association. Lawyers have their professional association. Marine Corps Association is that for Marines. And so we support the professional development, primarily the professional development of Marines. Each of the services, they have their own training and education arm that works on that, but really our focus is on professional military education and in some ways augmenting what the service provides, and then providing opportunities for Marines to kind of excel the professionalism of arms. In doing so, there's a number of things that we support. We have several programs and funded through the foundation and donor development, like unit libraries, as an example. If a unit wants to fill out their unit libraries with books, they can apply for funding to purchase books to fill out that library. If a particular command wants to conduct a battle study on a particular battle that tactically would be beneficial for the Marines to understand, we will fund units to go out on battle studies. And that could be, a local battlefield like Manassas, which isn't too far from here. We've sent folks out to Belleau Wood, to study that Marine battle. We also support, I guess our iconic things are on the two main publications. I mentioned the Gazette and the Leatherneck magazine. If you ask them about MCA, they will probably refer to those magazines as sort of the iconic brands for us. The Gazette is really our kind of professional journal. So if you want to find out sort of the, tactics, techniques, and procedures of the Marine Corps, and oftentimes you'll have officers or staff NCOs or junior Marines who have written articles for submission to talk about how to build a better X, or how to improve a certain procedure. Those articles are submitted, and if they're great, they're published in Gazette magazine. The Leatherneck magazine, I would say, is more of a storytelling platform. So if you want to read something about the history of a Marine unit in a battle, or what we would call their I was story, personal stories of like one Marine's experience in a particular battle, as well as current training that's going on in the Marine Corps now. Leatherneck magazine is that publication for you. So we provide both of those. We also support a number of professional events throughout the year. This year, 2025, we got about 24 or 25 on deck. And they fall into basically three main categories. You do professional dinners, and at those professional dinners, some are organized by deputy commandants. Others are out at the different bases and stations: Camp Lejeune, Camp Pendleton, Kaneohe Bay out in Hawaii, or Camp Butler in Okinawa, to sort of highlight the professional accomplishments of Marines, and also as a platform to discuss, topics that are in the topic du jour in that area. Those events are Freedom Marines, but we also have, sponsors, companies that'll sponsor those events, and those are kind of the preponderance of those events that we have. We also do leadership seminars. So if a unit wants to do a seminar to address a particular issue that they're dealing with, suicide awareness and prevention, we'll do leadership seminars with units. We're bringing experts on those topics, and work with those units to bring those Marines in, typically junior officers, junior enlisted Marines, to provide a seminar for them that will help them in their leadership endeavors. We
Do you,
also do.
I'm sorry, do you work with the Marine Corps League? Around here with the retirees, the Marine Corps League?
So we do. The main thing that we work with them is a program that we call Modern Day Marine. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically it's a military expo that we do every year, much like Sierra Space, much like AUSA. But we work hand in hand with the Marine Corps League um, here in the DC area to set up really a military expo on all the newest equipment and gear that the Marine Corps is either looking at or fielding, as well as sort of the educational piece. We'll have different seminars, different events, bring in different speakers to talk about different topics relevant to Marine Corps acquisitions, those types of things, as well as spouse-related events as well. With the league. So that's probably the big thing that we work with them every year. And it happens 3 days out of the year. This year it's April 29th through the 1st of May. But as you can imagine, that is a year-long planning project that we work
Yeah.
alongside with them to conduct every year. So a number of different things that MCA is involved in. To support Marines, support families of Marines. It's a membership-based organization as well. So we have premium memberships, which are about 54,000 Marines, and which is a paid membership. We have an associate membership, which if you go to one of our events, shop at our stores, you become an associate member at no cost. We've got about 230,000 of those members. So all told, just shy of 300,000 members of MCA.
So when we
So
finish this and we get it on the air, Central Florida Salute YouTube, you're going to pass it on to all those people so they can see you and enjoy Central Florida Salute.
yeah,
Correct?
yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. And based on what, Colonel Oliver has told me, you've got a pretty large veteran population in that area.
Oh, we do. We have a lot of veterans here. And I used to do Lakefront TV, which was the city of Leesburg. That's how I
Hmm.
started doing Salute. I did it for 10 years and then I left and I wanted to branch out more. They wanted me to stay in the studio. Well, I'm not too good on,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I said, my partner over here had filmed some shows with me, and she says, "Go do a YouTube." And this is what we've done now for the last 5 years. We completed 5 years, and I go all over Florida. I filmed some shows in Europe with the
Oh,
World
really?
War II, yeah, the museums and all that. So we try to get around. We try to get all over Florida, and we just did an interview at Idaho, right? Yeah. Idaho was another Marine, Hugh Nelson, another lieutenant colonel. So, and I know some of your friends, of course, Rico Player. You know
Yeah,
Rico.
Rico, Colonel Player, was a great mentor. Um, from actually he kind of took me under his wing when I was a lieutenant. I think I mentioned going to the Marine Expeditionary Unit coming out of Cherry Point. He was a captain with a really cool sounding name at the time. So but he started mentoring me back then and has been part of my, career ever since.
Great
Yeah,
guy.
great Marine officer.
You'll see him on Central Florida Salute if you go check it out. I
Yeah.
did an interview with, yeah, Rico. Because I do radio also on the 1410 to QAM down here, and Rico will
Hmm.
come in every once in a while. Of course, Colonel Oliver's with me all the time.
Yeah.
Plays together. He's something else, you know. I have a lot of friends who are Marines. Great organization, great people, and thank you for what you're doing with the association there.
Well, I appreciate that. I thank you for what you're doing to kind of highlight, the veterans that are in the area and abroad. Um, it's great work, and we have a lot of unsung heroes out there that don't always get their recognition. And you do a great job of bringing that out and sharing those stories with other folks and other veterans as well.
Yeah, I got a Walter Moss who was he's with the Lord now. He was a Marine in Vietnam. And you go sit down in a Legion post or an AMVETS post, and you're having a beer, you're sitting next to somebody, you don't really know who they are, you
Yeah.
know, offhand until you start talking to them. Walter Moss was highly decorated in Marine Corps in Vietnam, and he was a tunnel rat, and you wouldn't
Oh,
know
wow.
because the guy's about 250 now.
Yeah.
A long time ago, I did several tunnel rats, and of course. Like I said, Bill Cumba, who was a dear friend of mine.
You can tell them about Bill, the one at the nursing home, the assisted living, the one that sings the national anthem every morning. That was just a touching story.
Which one?
The one that sang the national anthem every morning.
He wasn't a Marine.
No, but
Oh,
that's
okay.
the kind of commitment, though.
Yeah. My partner would like me to talk to you about, I visit different nursing homes and different Legion posts, VFWs, what have you. And we were down in a nursing facility, and I interviewed a couple of guys, and there was a guy sitting in a little scooter over there and hunched over. And I talked to the guy who ran this association, like a club inside this nursing home.
Huh?
And I said, "You think he wants to do a show?" And he goes, "Oh, he can't talk." And my partner did not hear that. And she says, "Hey, you want to interview?" Yeah. So he came over in his scooter. He was Navy, I do believe. And yeah, he was a submariner. So I know a little bit about
No
submarines.
kidding.
I kind of carried a conversation because
Yeah.
he had a stroke and he couldn't speak very well. So after the interview, I was talking to somebody else, and they said, he likes to sing the national anthem. We found him going out the front door down to the ball field to sing the national anthem at a softball game.
No
So
kidding.
back down there with all these other veterans that lived there. I said, "Bill, lead us in the national anthem." So he got up out of his scooter as best he could, and he sings the national anthem for us. That
Wow.
made my day and made his day too.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
I try to tell people that we're in the military. You have to understand. You can't understand a military person unless you were a military person.
Yeah.
Unless you walk in my shoes or their shoes, or you have an association with them, you don't really understand. And there's a lot of great history, and that's what we try to do is preserve that history and
Hmm.
the great things that the military people are doing.
And
Retired and active
yep.
military.
Yeah, I was saying and continue to do after they've left the service.
That's why you're here to tell us about the Marine Corps Association and the great things you do. How did I do?
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity um to share what we do and be a part of what you do to share what veterans are doing for veterans. Um, One thing we are trying to do is garner a larger veteran population out there, become members of the association because we know there are folks that still want that connection, right? You know, and not everybody has the opportunity to drive on to Quantico, or every day. They're in places like Idaho and Rhode Island. And, um, so hopefully, if this, generates some interest who want, hey, let me get a copy of that Leatherneck magazine so I can read about some of the exploits of, Marines back from my day, and kind of get that connection again. Um, that's hopefully, this will help do that.
And I tell people too, we talk about PTSD and all that other stuff, and there is help out there. You got
Hmm.
to get it. The Spartan Pledge is one thing that people could do. The Veterans Administration does a lot of things, and being a member of the veterans community to me is an honor, and to share their stories I'm proud to do it, And like I say, I get to meet great people like you and Rico, and I also met a two-star general in the Marine Corps, David Kaufman. I don't know if you know him.
I don't, but Carl Albert told me that, that you may have interviewed him at one point, or
Go to Central Florida Salute YouTube.
yeah, yeah.
He turned out to be a good friend of mine. It's kind of funny because all I was a little E4, but who knows?
Everybody serves, right?
That's
You
right.
know.
One of the most a Navy pilot, Captain Charlie Plum. I don't know if you ever heard of Captain Charlie Plum. He was in Hanoi
Awesome.
with McCain and all them.
Okay.
Yeah, and he wrote a book, I'm No Hero. He says, my hero was the guy who packed my parachute. He says, we all do our part. And that's how it
Yeah,
works. So,
she's right. And you probably have seen this too. I think a lot of times, veterans and active duty alike are humble, so they're not as quick to really talk about themselves, but they'll talk about their buddies all day, right?
yeah,
They'll
yeah.
say, "Oh, I didn't do nothing, but Smitty over here, he's the guy that,
That's the guy you want to talk to. Yeah,
that's
I
right."
get that. I get that a lot. You know, uh, but I've had guys who, I had one soldier to talk to me, and he was in Iraq, and we talked about when he came home, and his stepfather came over and he says, "What did he tell you?" I said, "What do you mean? What did he tell me?" He says, "He won't tell me nothing." I says, "When he's ready, he will, but don't push." And there are some guys who will never talk, but there's others I sat down with who they shared things with me, like, and I, for instance, I did a guy who was there during World War II in the concentration camps when they were freeing the Jews, and he
Yeah.
talked about going in there and seeing the skeleton people and everything. It was just an amazing story, and he finally convinced them that he's American, that we are free. We're going to get you out of here. Eisenhower sent us, you're the first wave to talk to you and tell you you're going home. And he handed him a Hershey bar, candy bar. You know that guy, the skeleton people? He broke it in pieces for every one guy that was in that barracks.
Wow.
So they all had a piece. And he says, and when they finally realized what was going on, they pulled up a board and had potato vodka there. So they all had to drink together. Stories like that, I mean, they're unbelievable. The men and women that I've talked to, I have a lot of women veterans, and uh, I'm just glad I get to talk to you and keep up your good work with the association.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being the vessel for those stories as well, to share them with us, because a lot of those we would never know about if they hadn't, been a part of your program and
Yeah, well,
others like it.
people ask me why I do that. I grew up around World War II people. My great uncle, my uncle Ted was awarded Distinguished Cross for heroism on the beaches of D-Day. Took
Oh,
out a
really?
machine gun, was on his way to take out a pillbox, flak hit him in the eye, lost his eye. And that's a whole story I could tell you there. But growing up around those people, seeing the sacrifices made in World War II and Korea and Vietnam and Gulf War, you say to yourself, how blessed we are to live in this country when we have men and women that put their life on the line so that we can live in this freedom. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One thing, World War II and really all the wars in particular, when in my day and age, you know that your deployment's going to be 6 months and you're coming back. Your deployment's going to be 12 months and you're coming back. But back then it's like you come back when the war is over, right? There's no
It ain't
like
over until it's over there.
right, so
What they used to say. Yeah.
yeah, so that takes a certain type of person of mentality to know that you're here until the job's done. There's no, you know, And you know what the job is done looks like. It's everyone on the other side with their leaders, either with a white flag or, or not fighting in some form or fashion. So, which is a different, it's a certain type of person, I think, that can, that can do that.
Well, it's time to say goodbye. You know, I told you how we do this on Salute, right? You ready? All our veterans out there, our active military and their families, we salute you for all you do. Till next time.